good morning, and welcome to Vibe Talk Facing the Lion in session. Welcome. We are here, and I know it's been a minute for Vibe Talk in session, but as you know, if you've done any type of communication with Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast, Vibe Talk After Dark, you know that we only bring you the best. Happy Monday to all. Today we're going to talk about betrayal. And we talk about these as experiences and the emotions and being able to use it as identifiers. And it's a familiar subject, betrayal. You may, before we get started, join in the discussion. We're live. And today we're talking about betrayal. You know, when you've talked to people, you think about experiences that you've had with people close, with people in relationships, period. Our lines are open 1-888-721-9260. So we want to talk about what this means for us. And as you make reference to this particular subject, if you want to call in, if you want to talk about that, if you want to talk about how it made you feel. Betrayal is disloyalty, breaching one's trust. We want to talk about that. It's really important. And it really has to do with the experience of breaking trust, in that you destroy that trust by something that is untruth. It's important that we talk about it because I talk with people who have had this happen to them. And it's not always the same story. There's different stories for it. A person can be deceitful, for lack of a better word, lying, giving secret information, and some of the betrayals are deliberate. And if you're dealing with that, then we want you to call in, talk about it. If you're not free to talk about it, we want you to be able to understand it in its totality. So, what is betrayal that has happened to you? You know, we think of people using the word sellout, canavery, cheating, stealing, double crossing. There's so many words for that. And we want to really open up the lines to be able to have you call in. Has that experience happened to you? And we're going to be talking about it. If you're listening, we want you to use the QR codes. Please, please be mindful of that. We're going to be able to address some things that maybe you feel that you couldn't talk about, but you'd listen to quietly or privately. We want to make sure that you do that. So go and see our YouTube page, and you'll be able to see just how to get to me. So let's think about betrayal. You've got someone you love, and they have created for you a situation of infidelity, maybe moving on in a relationship. Let's say a married couple begins to pursue someone else. And just as we do in the Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast, here's what we do here. We talk about truth, feelings, and while betrayal is not something uncommon, betrayal is something that maybe we have experienced it in other ways. What do you do? What have you done? Sometimes betrayal comes from disengagement. When you have disengaged, let me help you to understand it much more. We go deep here in Vibe Talk Facing the Lion in session. I want you to know that the disengagement of betrayal, let's get in our thinking mode. Let's start to talk about that. I'm going to talk about things that maybe you find difficult. When we talk about disengagement, person stops caring, stops paying attention, stop investing, and you're fighting for the relationship. And as you begin to fight for that relationship, things start to slip away and there's hurt. We're going to talk about feelings. And then that disengagement starts to be triggered by shame, fears. And that fear derives from being abandoned, feeling unworthy and unlovable. And when we think about it, we feel like we're broken. And it even feels like it's crazy, because what do? We say, what did I do? What did we do to feel betrayed? We think about friendships. People start to disengage. We think about this experience, and I quote, when the marriage, your first marriage, first husband, first wife, you feel like it's falling apart, you're begging your spouse to please go to a marriage counseling. And so they kind of, no, I don't want to do that. And they refuse. They give you whatever excuse. Too much money, too much time. But then the real truth starts to seep in that one or the other feels the compatibility was never there, or the compatibility has been lost. And so you do what you feel is best. And that disengagement starts to destroy the marriage. So then when we think about a second marriage, and we have scenario number 2, that scenario looks like this. You start to get the help in the second marriage, and the disengagement is that in the committed marriage you start to want to work on what you see as troubled, and the other person is non-committal. Perhaps this is where you want. Good morning for those who are with us. We are in Vibe Talk Facing the Lion in session. If you want to join in the conversation, the number to call is 1-888-721-9260. We're talking about the experience of betrayal. And so in the second marriage, you are committed to getting help, but the other person disengages. They begin to say, I want the help, but the other person does not want the help. You call and they don't answer. And then you say, why didn't you come? Why didn't you come and be committed to this seeking help? They disengage. And we're talking about disengaging in marriage, relationships. We're going to look at some ways that people do this. What are you going to do? Are you going to get the help? Or are you going to let the person who is committed to you overpower the help that you want so desperately? We are looking at how do we handle it. How would you guys handle it? You know, our podcast is not all about good morning, Tyler. Our podcast is not always about giving you the answers. But it's more of, what would you do? And that's why we're asking the question, have you been betrayed? Maybe you're not in a marriage. Maybe there's been other things that you have been betrayed by. The disengagement, betrayal, being in a relationship with someone who maybe doesn't care, stops investing, stops paying attention. What's your feeling there? Do you feel hurt because you still love them? They're not giving you the love that you feel that you need? Or has the love grown cold, empty? I want you to think about this, and I want you to understand that it's okay to say, gosh, that hurt. Gosh, this hurts. Sometimes we don't want to bring shame upon ourselves. We don't want to make an admission that hurts. So we start to think there is something wrong with us because we now have these feelings because someone has betrayed us. How many of you feel this way? You are at any time able to get online with me at any time, and we treasure that. We want you to be able to get online to talk about it. And by the way, you can now send us letters, expressions through Vibetalkfacingthelion at gmail.com. Vulnerability, when we are feeling a sense of betrayal, broken trust, comes when we are sharing our feelings. You know, what we want you to do is face those lions, even in a situation where you're talking one-on-one. And sometimes we feel desperate. We feel woundedness, I should say. But let me talk about the vulnerability for a minute. When we share appropriately and we have boundaries, sometimes we share with people things and we really don't have a close relationship, but we talk things out. We begin to develop what was once a disconnect. We talked about disengagement. We start to open up and re-engage. Not with the same person, but by sharing your thoughts with people that you're not close to. And I know some of you may say, oh my goodness, I'm just going to get rewounded. That's not what we want for you at all. You may even ask the question after rethinking, readjusting, and that takes time because you have been betrayed, because you have experienced betrayal. You might ask yourself, or question yourself, which is the same thing, why are you so vulnerable? Why do you withhold what you do? What makes you not withhold? What motivates you to share? We want to talk about the vulnerability that comes from the experience of betrayal. As one person said, they kept oversharing. They felt like they had gone too far when it was on the subject of betrayal. Why did they feel that way? Because they were worried that someone may judge them. Now let's retract. We think about vulnerability and we think about how vulnerable we are because we've been betrayed. So we go back and we say, now I'm having anxiety because I feel like I'm gonna be rejected. I want you to think that, what if you didn't share? And that doesn't mean that you share with everyone, because everyone doesn't have to betray you. But if you've been betrayed, don't give up on life, because sometimes you have an overfill of friends. Your jar is overfilled with friends, and you can find in that feeling of friends that there's someone that you can talk with. So betraying, think about your vulnerability. Has it pushed your limits? Or has it helped you to dig deeper? Because I don't only bring up the subject, but how has it made you feel? Do you find the deeper core of yourself? And when we talk about the deeper cores of yourself, coming into connection with yourself, because some betrayal experiences has caused people to disconnect from themselves. But I want you to understand the core of you. I've oftentimes described it as this. You bite into the apple, and if you've ever gotten down to the core of the apple, what do you see? Of course, you start to see the seedlings. What has rooted that apple? What has made it become the whole shell of that delicious apple? And we're very much like that. You get down to the core of what makes us who we are. There's many layers of us, and we're going to talk about the layers of us. You can catch me on the podcast, Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast. You can even join our group on Friday, wherever you're living. By the click of a button, we are starting at 11 o'clock. Be there. You want more information? 1-888-721-9260. 1-888-721-9260. While you're learning from betrayal, you are learning to accept the imperfect parts of yourself. Just because an apple has a dent in it doesn't mean that it's of no use. And just because something has happened does not mean that you are of no use. You know, vulnerability to betrayal, we have to relearning the steps of hoping, trusting, and knowing that those are sacred. Hope, trust. And if you are a praying person, you keep that sacred as well. Moving on, we want to talk about triggers of betrayal. Betrayal can come in forms of physical betrayal, emotional, verbal, or sexual. And we want to have mature audiences. So if you are a mature audience, please call in. Lines are available. What do? We start to think about the effects, cause and effects. Remember, we get rooted down to the core of ourselves. What has caused this? Because some of us, we don't speak on betrayal. We say everything is nice, everything's good, wonderful life, wonderful wife, wonderful husband, wonderful kids, everything's great. But when you start to think about it, in the first forms of you thinking that nothing is the matter, we want you to really think and key into the core of you, connection to you. How do we start to heal the betrayal? And it doesn't necessarily have to be you're traumatized by every little thing. But we want to talk about what can cause that. We talk about relationships. We talk about things that have happened to us. I started out with one of the situations or circumstances of betrayal. But there are many others. For instance, it could be infidelity, manipulation, neglect, and the four that I mentioned: physical, emotional, something you said, something someone else said, or sexual abuse. Dishonesty. What happens when you start to experience dishonesty? Start that secretive. We're not just talking about privacy. We're talking about being secretive and in withholding information that is pertinent for you to know. When you or I are in relationships, this can happen. Maybe you don't want to leave that relationship. Back in the day, people stayed together because of the children. Are you in a relationship that someone has betrayed you and you become blind to it, like a person none seeing? Even the blind can have insight in the mind, knowledge in the mind. I was thinking of a situation where when people say they don't have income of their own, as if they can't survive, and they put blinders on and not giving of their true selves because they deny that this is actually happening, this betrayal. This betrayal. We talk about betrayal in romantic relationships. This is not to suggest in any way that you leave, because we let you work it out. I have earned a certification in life coaching and counseling, and I don't tell people what to do. But we talk about feelings. I hope you all can hear me clearly. Excuse me. Some of the feelings when you think about infidelity, loss of your self-esteem, loss of self-worth. You experience a feeling of anger. So mad. How could they do this to you? How could he or she have done this? Why didn't I see it? Numbness. You feel guilt. Difficulty controlling emotions. You start to think, what are the details? How did this person get into the thought of infidelity? So now you want to know details, but then you say, no, I don't want to hear details. No. But in the mirror, that soul of your mirror, that is you, that wants to hear, but no, don't tell me. That's intrusive thoughts. You want to know, but you really don't want to know, but you do want to know. So you're fighting with yourself. Loss of faith in other people. You begin to be suspicious, and rightly so, because that has affected you. And it comes with a whole bunch of other things: depression, anxiety, mental health symptoms. And then it turns into physical symptoms: pain, distress physically, insomnia, sleepless nights. If you have experienced that, then I say now would be the time to think about what you're going to do from this point on. Not blinding yourself. And the reason we do that is because we're in fear of something. Something makes us afraid. But I want you to experience the sense of self. You know, many people have gone on. They thought that they would never get past it. We think about the effects of betrayal. Even as children, we cannot recognize or express the management of our emotions. And, you know, isn't it true that when you can reach into your own mind and heart and be able to pull out why you feel the way you do, because there's always a reason. People who experience anxiety or depression, it's not always something that they experience because it's a chemical dependency. But to become aware of what's going on inside of you is so awakening when we think about it. We want to be able to become emotionally intelligent, aware, because it's discovery of something about us. Many people have, because of betrayal, have had to deal with substance abuse, eating disorders, attachment issues, having difficulty trusting others, panic attacks, and even thoughts of suicide. We talked about the physical parts, but the key here is recognizing it. And that's what we do. We give you a chance to be able to say, this happened to me. And by your going through what you're going through. It's important, ladies and gentlemen, to really think and rethink. You know, betraying is such a strong experience. And some of us detach ourselves from reality because the betrayal is too much. We don't necessarily want to be familiar with the reality that, hey, this happened. So we want to avoid the memories. If you've had that, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're young and your parent fails to protect you, it becomes very deep of all the aforementioned symptoms. You could grow up and be okay, but it will eventually affect you. Fear of future behaviors, be aware of those too, without shutting yourself out. When you have that fear, I want you to notice it. I want you to be able to address it by telling yourself that you have a fear of something. Fear of something. Fear of this betrayal happening again. Because sometimes it will happen again. I can't promise you anything. But I want you to not avoid. Come a little closer. I want you not to avoid being able to become assertive, aware. And let's take the first step of being aware of the betrayal. Because I hear people say they forget. I had one such person who loved their parents. Loved their parent. Was almost fearful, paralyzed, fearful of saying I was betrayed by one or the other or both. And as they were talking in the conversation, they started to get in the conversations. And I noticed that there was some type of abuse, and I had them repeat what they said. Painfully enough, they discovered that there was some sexual abuse going on at the tender age of 6. 6. So it is true that you could very well have a mental block. And then there's that part where you will forget it as that mental block, because that is your defense mechanism. So we want to be able to learn what these feelings are. I think it's important. I think it's very important. How do we begin to recover? How do you rebuild? What are you guys doing to rebuild? Because when you've been betrayed, you have to rebuild. You have to start from somewhere. Sometimes being triggered by this, that, and the other. We're going to be triggered. You and I will be triggered. But to ignore it is not going to help you heal. If you think that you're okay because of it, you've just stored and shoved your memories as if you were less important, unimportant, not valuable enough. And when you start to heal, it's going to look different for everyone. So let's talk about acknowledge. Come to terms with what happened. And that's another reason why we have the one-on-ones with me instead of group. This is guided so that you can do this, coming to terms. No matter how many times you don't want to think about it, you don't want to talk about it, it can't be erased. But you know what your mind does? You start to think about it. That's the trigger point. Your memory starts to be jogged. You could be just sitting down to a social event and there might be a song or there might be something that was said or a reminder. Driving in your car, in your own thoughts. And sometimes they're very painful. They're very painful. But I want you to acknowledge it because it will help you to explore. What do you need to explore? What's behind this? What do I know about this? We're talking about acknowledgement. Because that opens the doorway to your healing process. There's always a first step. I went to an art class not long ago. And I learned something in the art class that if I wanted to be an artist, I have steps to follow because I'm not an artist. But if I wanted a painting to look like the instructors or to even come similar to that, there's even steps to painting. I wanted you to think about it. I want you to think about how yours is going to come to an acknowledgement. You know, I talk to people. Myself, I've experienced self doubt, self criticism. But then I learned through my experience that I could come to terms with things. And things of recent, I've been able to analyze a situation. Do we have feelings? Yeah, we might have anger. We might have disappointment, distrust, betrayal because of all of these. And there might be some underlying issues in your relationship status, lack of communication, lack of intimacy, because you have to explore ways to resolve them. So, how do you resolve them? One way is to ask yourself, how has this affected me? And sometimes don't we like to start out with, he or she did this? So why don't we choose to look at it from how it has affected us by saying the? Because I know you're probably wondering, if I don't blame he, she, them, or they, the. And then we can go back and rewrite that word the and change it to the core of the problem, the seed of the apple. Some people choose negative over negative emotion. But I always want you to think of the positive. What are you going to get out of talking about it? Talking about betrayal. When we are accepting emotions that come with the aftermath of betrayal, what do we do? Start writing down, even if it's one word a day, because sometimes things are so painful that you really can't get them all out. Or you may feel so many that it's like that 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle that you got to start putting together to see the whole picture. Do you feel sick because of the aftermath of betrayal? Humiliated, ashamed, furious, anger, sick to your stomach, grieved? When you deny that, notice that it's detaching. It is a sense of, I can't handle that, so you push that away. But I want you to be able to think of one word. If I ask you, how did it make you feel? And give me one emotion. I think we're capable of doing that. Sometimes we want to hide or block our emotions because it's easy. It's safest for so many. But when we mask them or avoid them, it becomes difficult. I like to do this with many of my clients, either in group or individually or in workshops, to name the emotion. When you're able to do that, you're able to regulate your feelings, naming your emotions. Even if you feel like, gosh, that's not me, I'm not an angry person. Sometimes you're going to get angry. And the safest thing to do when you think about your anger is to be able to tell yourself, tell someone else what that emotion is. I'm starting to do that because I never want to walk around as a life coach and certified counselor to feel like I've got this feeling, but I don't know what it is. How many times have we heard that? Or feeling fear of saying that you were angry with someone because of a situation. I find myself to be in that situation, and after saying how angry I was, I stopped the guilt tripping with myself because I was able to identify, become aware, and recognizing them. Coping with my feelings, coping with your emotional awareness, it helps you to be able to look at your feelings. And it's okay, I promise that you won't die looking at those feelings. Support things like this in session. In session has a twofold purpose. One, it connects you to our direct connect number, to a real person, that's me, and it connects you to the weekly podcast. And so the QR codes that you're seeing, I want you to be able to just scan your camera and to know that it's okay to get help. Group. Many people want to come in as a group. You can do this by walking into our office if you're in the local community of Palmdale, California, or the Antelope Valley. If you're close enough to be able to drive, get there, because you're going to meet other people who have experienced things, and they can tell you, and you can say, I relate. We actually started out our podcast like that, by putting up our electronic hands saying, I relate. What I want to do is have a word of caution with you when you are sharing your feelings. We are not asking you to go to a complete stranger. Maybe you want to start building trust, so maybe you want to seek support such as this here. Maybe if this isn't your cup of tea, you can come and ask for resources. 1-888-721-9260, because we realize that everybody cannot be trusted. So go to those of whom you feel trusted. And of course, coming to me for the first time is going to seem awkward because you don't know me, but this is your platform. And of course, we do one-on-ones. Anybody can connect. And now I want to talk about you. You have experienced the feeling of betrayal. Think ahead. I want you to be able to know that it's believable that you can rebuild trust. It's possible. You are possible. So as you begin to recover from what is betrayal, I want you to think about your needs. You know that time when you lay awake and you're just not able to sleep, you're unable to sleep because you're recycling the distressing thoughts. what do you do then? Music is my forte. I love listening to music that relaxes. You know, people read before they go to sleep. They do things that stress them before they go to bed. But I want you to think about what you can do to de-stress. You know, a lot of times people don't eat. Have you ever had someone that has been through something and they stop eating? They stop eating. Keep yourself fed, however you choose to do that. You know, for me, when something devastating happened to me and that day would come, because there's always a day of the week that something happens. You don't wait for it to happen, but it's always associated with a time and a date, stamped forever. So I started to use the day that it happened to get into something that was most comfortable, funny movies. Because I could get to a healing place for the time being. Every day is not a healing day. But for that day, I now use it as I'm going to watch my favorite movie. I'm going to do this. Perhaps you're going to do something else on that day that it happened. People get into a lot of things that emotionally helps them to heal. And we're not saying you can't grieve. We're not saying that you can't have a memory. We're not saying that you're not affected, not traumatized. We're saying not any of those things. We're saying to you that there's always a way to heal. To think of possibilities because you're possible. You know, when coming into the line of being a certified life coach, counselor, you have to go through some things in order to be able to tell someone else your survival story. I think it's very important that we do that. Because if you can't experience it, or if you didn't experience it, what is your plan of helping someone? Anybody can tell someone what to do, what not to do, but when you're talking to someone who has been through it, our job is to listen, but the other job is, can you say, I have experienced that? And so as you are dealing with certain things, they learn, you learn, I learn, it's relatable. It must be relatable. You can't ever not have experienced something to tell someone you understand. Did I say that correctly? You can't be able to tell someone how you feel or you understand without having gone through it. That's a truth. It must be relatable. Maybe not the same exact experience, but the same feeling. And it starts like this. I feel angry because I was betrayed. Did you know that saying that is a stepping stone to healing? I feel angry because I felt betrayed. Just saying those things. Do you know how many people in the room or on the air can relate to your being angry about betrayal? And if you come across this podcast, it is Vibe Talk Facing the Lion in session. I want you to think about this. I gave you scenarios. I gave you two. One was a failed marriage, the other one was a second failed marriage, but in a different light. I want you to think about three things that we could do, or you can do, your choice. The self-blame. Examine those feelings. The self-esteem. Where are you at with that? Are you working on building up your self-esteem? And the emotions that you're dealing with that are difficult. How are you doing the coping strategies? I want you to think about that. Just know that just because you were betrayed, that is not the ultimate, and you shall overcome it, but it's going to be totally up to you. We realize the severity of people's traumas and betrayals, and then talking about it is important. Take that step. And if you need help, it's okay to get the help that you need. This is your talking space. But I'll guarantee you that if you have experienced betrayal, you'll come to understand that there are many resources. Are you going to get better in a day? No. But what you'll do is be able to identify. You'll be able to get in your comfortable space of saying, this is how this makes me feel. And some people even go as far as to say they can do it all by themselves. And I say, hats off to you. But if you need us, we're here. You have been with Vibe Talk Facing the Lion in session. I am Nisi, and we want you to use the 1-800-72 or 1-888-721-9260, and we will put this online so that you can hear this. Betrayal. We want you to be able to understand that betrayal is worth talking about, because how else will you heal? I want to thank you for spending your time with me this morning. I think it's really important, and I appreciate you so much. We are affiliated with Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast. The In Session is on YouTube. This is going to be our 7th show, but who's counting? I want you to know that if we disappear for a while, we're not to be forgotten, because we're working on something better. And we have people who listen to us that live out of the country. We're so grateful for that. But if you're listening to this podcast, weigh in, share your thoughts, put your comments in the comments section, even for YouTube. And again, I'm Nisi, and I'm so glad to be your host. And I thank you. I wish you all happy Monday. And just because we're not on live, you still can weigh in. That's why I wrote Betrayal. All about coping, all about scenarios, and all about you and your feelings. And if you know of someone, scan the QR codes. And I thank you. Until next time, happy Monday to all.